Okay, that should be it recording now. Can you see my PowerPoint? Okay, good. Okay, so I am going to be going over my voice and movement modules that we have done this year in my evaluation. I'm going to start off by talking about my voice modules. Now, we did a lot of different modules over the course of the year, but the three that I want to specifically focus on are my accents, my sight reading, and my Shakespeare monologue. Now, for accents, we were using accents a lot throughout the year, but the two that we mainly focused on was RP and Southern accents. Now, for these two different accents, we had to do a lot of practice by using numbers, vowels, and recording ourselves doing them. And we were also given lots of material, such as certain sentences to practice our accents on. Now, these two accents were very helpful throughout the year, as we were using both the Southern American accent and the RP, well, myself was using the RP accent. And with both accents, we also had to perform a monologue that was provided to us by our lecturer. Now, one of my strengths throughout doing our accents was being able to, especially with the RP accent, being able to pick it up quite quickly. This was due to having past experience with the accent by doing Pride and Prejudice last year. I found the RP accent a lot easier to get into. I understood the vowels a lot more. My weakness in this accent was, however, my articulation. As naturally myself, I'm quite a lazy speaker, so getting into the more very well pronounced style of RP was a bit hard for me, but I managed to overcome this by practicing my articulation using bone props and tongue twisters. My Southern American accent I found a lot harder, as I just couldn't grasp the pronunciations or the twang of the accent as well as I could the RP accent. I used different types of materials to help me overcome this, such as ear training, watching lots of online material about the accent, and eventually I was able to mimic the accent well enough for my Southern American piece. But I would like to in future further go into my accent and study it a lot more, just so I would be more confident in performing the accent as I was during my piece. Overall, for my accent unit, I feel that I did very well. I would in future like to look at different accents that would probably challenge me a lot more, such as perhaps an Irish accent or maybe a Central European accents I haven't looked at in the past. Now, the next part I want to look at is my sight reading. Now, sight reading was when we were given a script and only given about 5 minutes to look over our scripts before we had to perform them. This was very new to me, as normally I'd like to have my script studied and analysed before I even stand in front of people. But this challenged me a lot for my confidence and also for my ability to think on the spot for my characterization. Now, I think one of my strengths was being able to quickly identify what vocal considerations I needed for the piece and apply them into my delivery. I also had to think of my accent and my region when I was doing the pieces, which was quite hard at first, but then I knew what to look out for, such as indications in the text over where the piece might be set, such as how the character speaks, and also looking at the character itself, and sometimes you would just have to guess. A weakness of this was, however, I wasn't giving myself enough chance to place myself. I would just be delivering it straight to the side or not thinking about my staging because I was so caught up in thinking about my characterization. If I was to do sight reading again, which I hope I will, because it was actually quite an interesting experience for me, I would be able to take more time to consider my performance in the whole and not just certain aspects of my performance. Now, my Shakespeare monologue is the last part I will be looking at. With my Shakespeare monologue, I believe that it did come quite easily to me, as I do have somewhat of a basic understanding of Shakespeare on a whole. The monologue I chose to do was Portia's monologue from The Merchant of Venice, which is a Shakespeare play I am very familiar with. and I have studied in the past, so this monologue was very easy for me to learn. I believe that one of my strengths by doing this monologue was the fact that I was aware of the text. I knew what she was talking about, I knew who she was speaking to, what she was speaking about, and I was able to take this into consideration when giving my vocal performance of the character. I also understood the character quite a bit. I had done character studies on her in the past, which helped me learn more about her and portray her better in my monologue. I do believe that one of my weaknesses here, again, was my articulation. As in RP, as in Shakespeare, it is very important that you pronounce and you're very clear with your words. Again, I overcame this by using my bone prop, doing my tongue twisters, just trying to get myself into a place that I could pronounce the words properly. And this is something I want to work on in future, as my articulation is still not as precise as I would probably like it to be. Be talking about the movement part of my presentation. Now, like voice, for movement we did a lot of different modules throughout the year, but the main three that I want to look at today is my animal studies with my group, my solo animal studies, and the Laban efforts. Now, at the beginning of the year, we were assigned into different groups for our animal movement. I was put into the meerkat group, and throughout the module, we had to observe the animal, figure out how the animal moved, how the animal interacted with its own kind, and how we could turn it into a group piece. Now, my group, the first thing we did was watch documentaries and videos online about meerkats. And the biggest challenge for us off the bat was obviously meerkats are very agile, flexible creatures who spend most of the time on all fours, which obviously was a bit of a problem for us. So our biggest strength throughout the whole piece was figuring out how we could adapt our bodies into meerkats, figuring out how we could walk like meerkats and how we would be able to present meerkats through us while obviously not being able to move anything like meerkats. And this turned out very well for us, as in the end product of our movement piece, we were able to present ourselves as meerkats, and taking from this piece was an ability to contort my body into different types of beings or species, which I think that would kind of help me out in future. One of our weaknesses through the piece, though, was we couldn't, obviously, being our strength that we were being able to transform ourselves into meerkats, we were just not able to get to the level of accuracy that probably would have helped us. But overall, I think our group piece worked well. Another one of our strengths was our tempo and our use of ambience throughout our piece. Since meerkats are very alert animals, we thought it'd be very important to show their alertness in our piece by moving our heads to the time of like branch snaps. That was very successful in our final performance, and I think overall the group piece for our animal movement was very successful, and I think I will take a lot of the things I learned from that piece with me. Now, for our solo piece, it worked a bit differently. The point of our solo animal was to use animal studies to help us perform our midsummer scenes. So we chose an animal that was very similar to our character. I chose a spaniel to help me portray Helena. I chose this animal for her as she was referred to as a spaniel in the text, and looking at her characterization, I thought it would be fitting to have her as a spaniel. Now, like the group piece, we were told to observe the animal, and I am very lucky. I have a spaniel cross at home, so I was able to do this very well. And I believe, and adding her to the character of Helena, I struggled with a lot. I wasn't able to bring much of the character studies into my portrayal of Helena. So the last thing that I am going to be looking at is the Laban efforts. Now, we've been looking at the Laban efforts throughout all of our time at college, but specifically in our final year, we were told to look at it again. Now, this time I wanted to use it more in helping me portray my characterization during the midsummers. Now, Laban itself consists of using movements such as slashing, floating, punching in order to create a characterization. Now, I use this more specifically in my portrayal of Titania and Hippolyta, and also I used it a lot in my graded unit pieces to help me decipher more characterization and bring out more emotion in my character. I also used it particularly in my Brighton Beach Memoirs pieces in my graded unit piece in order to show my character's age and her mental maturity, as she was quite a young girl. So I decided to use more slashing, floating, more upbeat movements in order to show that she was quite younger. And in my The Importance of Being Earnest piece, I decided to use more grounded movements such as swishing and etc. to show that she was quite older and a bit more mature in herself. Now, Laban effort is something that I will like to use in future, as I think that it helped me to decipher a contrast between my characters and also to help show some movement that wasn't just my own. A weakness I had for this, though, was not being as confident in showing this movement or being able to translate it more into the text that I was doing at the time. But one of my strengths was definitely being able to have it change how I moved as turning myself into that character.